Well, Jillian Michaels stormed off the set of her own show after a co-host brought up Charlie Kirk being offered money from Israel. Watch this.
Who used to work for the Iran-backed newspaper Al Akbar in Beirut and contributed to Al Jazeera.
Is, yeah.
Why is it every time we track down a lie, we end up finding people connected to Qatar or Iran?
There's no proof
behind
this
it?
ever happened.
So
none.
Wait, how does that debunk the fact that...
he just read it.
Where's your proof that $150 million was offered from Bibi Netanyahu?
No, I'm referring...
Where is the proof?
Please do not get any...
No, because I didn't want to cover this, and you guys insisted. And I told you cover this shit, I'm going to rip you apart. Where is the proof?
We're not
that
saying that
Bibi
it
Netanyahu
happened. We're really
offered
not
Charlie
saying that it
$150 million.
Jillian,
okay, so we're not.
Okay, so
what
we're reporting on is
now
people in the marketplace, what they're saying. This is a discussion that's happening literally everywhere. We would be remiss if we didn't cover it to debunk it.
This conversation.
It's still,
over a week.
It's still pretty prevalent.
Is a week old.
It's still going on, Jillian.
Okay, well, nevertheless, where is the proof that actually happened?
Okay, so just to give you guys a little bit of background. So this is a show called Her Take. It is, I would assume, based in Los Angeles because that's where Anna Kasparian is. And I also maybe assume that, I actually don't know. I've never heard of this show before. Is this a TYT show and maybe filmed at their studios? I'm not really sure. But the other people in this show are, you've got Jillian Michaels. So this is kind of like obviously this is like The View, right? It's called Her Take. So Jillian Michaels, Anna Kasparian, Amy Dangerfield, and Lindy Lee are the hosts of this show. And apparently what had happened, the background on this, is that Jillian Michaels did not want to cover this story for whatever reason. I mean, she views the $150 million that Charlie Kirk was offered from Israel, the stories that have gone on from that Netanyahu offered him $150 million. She views this as a giant conspiracy, clearly. And apparently she told the co-host, I don't want to cover this. And they still pushed and said, yeah, but it's a story people are talking about. We want to cover it. So they were playing a clip from the PBD podcast, and just playing the clip has now triggered Jillian Michaels. I mean, completely triggered her, and now she's gone insane. There's other things that are being said in this segment that I want to point out, but let's continue watching her meltdown.
Said, according to this guy's reporting, he was offered $150 million.
Okay,
that was
also
corroborated by Candace.
It was corroborated by Candace, and not only that, by Nick.
And also
because listen, I like Candace. She has... People from his own team have said he has not seen her in years.
And yet last year they were on tour together. Last year they were on tour together.
If you want to talk about people on his team,
time they've been on camera together was 2023.
No, it was last year. They have a tour together.
Okay, everybody on his team.
Let's just calm.
I also just want to say, I don't know why anybody thinks that recreating The View is a good idea.
Has subsequently said this is not true.
No, they never. They actually.
Colvin, Eric Bolling, all of them are like, yeah.
Okay, Eric Bolling thought that he had two daughters. Okay, so I'm not going to.
Okay, Andrew Colvin. The narrative is not true. Charlie has a cordial relationship with Ackman. There's no blackmail, no intervention. Nothing like what Candace is suggesting.
That same Andrew said that Candace and Charlie remained friends. I just want to make sure.
He's saying this is not true.
But they were literally touring together last year.
Nothing like what Candace is suggesting. What does it have to do with their
what
friendship?
Does it have to do with you?
What does it have to do with their friendship? He's saying what Candace is suggesting.
I can't engage with you if you don't calm down.
He's saying what Candace is suggesting is not true.
He's talking about her suggesting Israel killed him. We're talking about the 100. Please do not conflate the two.
Okay. Well, unilaterally across the board now, we've got multiple accusations that all pile up to the same exact...
No, I think it's the furries. It's the furries. I think it's the furries. But a lot of people...
I don't know, and I don't... Look,
there's
for those who are saying
evidence to suggest none.
Oh, you're saying...
Guys, can we just stop for a second? This is ridiculous.
This is absurd.
Like, this whole thing is ridiculous. There are two things being conflated right now. There are conspiracy theorists who think Israel killed Charlie Kirk. They have yet to provide a shred of evidence proving that. Done. End of story.
We're not talking about that today.
I am talking about something entirely different.
Talking about that.
No, we're not.
And that's so they're going to start down this path of, I don't believe, there's no evidence Israel did it. Okay. And just pay attention to this. We've been seeing this a lot online. I don't believe Israel. There's no evidence Israel did it. I don't think Israel did it. Right? There's all of this that goes on. And so Anna's kind of starting to say that there's not a shred of evidence. There's also not a shred of evidence, mind you, that Jeffrey Epstein was working for Mossad. Not a shred of evidence. There's a lot of circumstantial evidence. And circumstantial evidence, by the way, can result in convictions. Circumstantial evidence is enough to convict. So circumstantial evidence actually matters. There's a lot of circumstantial evidence around Charlie Kirk, and that is what Candace Owens and Max Blumenthal and Tucker Carlson, that's what they've been bringing up. And that's what many of the sleuths online that are kind of paying attention to the assassination, saying a lot of this is not adding up toward the kid. But there's all these other things that are kind of adding up towards who would want Charlie dead and who could take a one-time kill shot. Compare that to the other shootings that we see. Even today, the ICE facility shooting, over 20 shots were heard versus one kill shot. Same thing with Trump's assassination attempt, one shot. You know, and these are apparently done by these young kids who were untrained or didn't have much training. So things just don't really add up. And then you layer in all this other circumstantial evidence, and that actually matters. Circumstantial evidence matters. But nonetheless, pay attention to them just denying that there's any evidence whatsoever towards Israel, even though they're discussing that Netanyahu offered Charlie Kirk $150 million, allegedly. And the people that are reporting this saying that they're not saying that Israel itself was going to give Charlie Kirk $150 million. They were clearly going to funnel that through whichever sources they needed to funnel that through, whether it be through Americans or probably through Americans, in order to make that happen.
Let me finish my fucking thought. Okay, the real issue here is that before most people even knew that Charlie Kirk was dead, you have Netanyahu giving multiple interviews talking about how, using the fucking moment for his own political purposes, like the fucking ghoul that he is. Let me finish my point.
Him killing Charlie Kirk.
Well, but that's a circumstantial evidence that people point to, right? The guilty person kind of declares themselves not guilty really quickly. And Netanyahu came out very publicly, very quickly, declaring, for one, Charlie Kirk was dead. I mean, he announced his death before mainstream media in the United States was announcing his death. So how would you know that unless you had people inside the hospital? Secondly, Netanyahu was very quick to be saying, I'm not guilty, we're not guilty. And that kind of raises suspicion with law enforcement, as it should. But no, they're saying, Anna's saying, well, no, he was doing it for political gain. Others are saying, no, we think that he was covering things up. Either way could be true, but you can't just simply discount the other way simply because you've put your opinion on it, which is he did it for his own political gain.
I said that. I literally
so now we're just going to make
Let me finish my point, Jillian, because none of us can finish the damn point without someone else jumping down your throat. I don't think that Israel killed him because there's no evidence of that. But I had a problem with Netanyahu exploiting an assassination in this country for his own political means and purposes and lying about the nature of his relationship with Charlie Kirk, because Charlie Kirk didn't like Netanyahu, just like any warm-blooded American shouldn't. Netanyahu is a bad guy.
But there's no evidence. So you don't even want to go down the road of maybe suspecting the people that didn't. So you have people that don't like each other. So you've got a feud, a somewhat public feud, in fact, one that resulted in allegedly potential, definitely, we do know for sure, an invitation to Israel. And we also know from reporting a potential offer of $150 million, a sort of bribe, if you will. And yet we're not going to even investigate that. I mean, you would be honestly, a shitty detective. If this were any other murder, in the world, you would be a shitty detective if you didn't actually follow a lead of who did this if somebody's dead, you've got somebody dead, who may have done it, who had motive. And if you don't go and investigate every single motive, then you're a bad detective. But instead, what we've got an entire country right now who feels the need to say, I believe in vaccines. And I mean, that's what they're doing. It's the same exact reasoning in their brains. They feel like, I don't want to be labeled a conspiracy theorist, so I believe in vaccines. I trust science. I believe in vaccines. And that's what they're saying. Israel didn't do it. There's no evidence Israel did this. Oh, really? Like I said, there's no evidence. In fact, Anna, there's no evidence that Jeffrey Epstein is linked to Mossad, but you certainly link him to Mossad. So how do you reconcile that in your mind? Because there's enough circumstantial evidence, and there's enough reason, there's enough motive there, right? There's all of these things that add up to Jeffrey Epstein was likely. We don't know for sure. We can't say for sure, but the vast majority of us believe Jeffrey Epstein was likely working for Mossad.
He wanted to make it seem like, no, we were all great. We were good. We had a great relationship. Little did we know behind the scenes, there was a lot of pressure towards
ends up being about how do we bash Israel. This is not for me.
Well, because they're committing a genocide, that's why.
I'm not interested in this.
Okay,
I know.
Guys. I'm sorry. Let's be good. Let's be good about precious Israel. Let the country committing a genocide. Yeah. Okay.
Zero. I think you guys agree. I fundamentally disagree with you about like every show doing this. I'm sorry.
Cool. So can we continue the conversation?
Yeah, let's not.
I mean, this was kind of the point. Jillian Michaels actually just showcased brilliantly the point as to why people believe Israel killed Charlie Kirk. Because they couldn't tolerate a different opinion. And Charlie Kirk was starting to question things. He was starting to say, why can't we push back on Israel? Why am I able to criticize the United States, but I can't criticize Israel? And it was inflaming really extremist Israelis. Not saying Israel as a government killed him, but saying that there are, when you say Israel as a government, it's kind of hard to, because a lot of bad things happen that Israel essentially directs, or we say it's done by Israel, when in fact it's actually done by groups that are pro-Israel or ultra-Zionist groups and then the government of Israel doesn't condemn it. In fact, they often celebrate it. So that is why that's why people say Israel, and they really sort of mean the blanket, the Zionists, the ultra-Zionist groups, and the extremists, the real hardliners, the violent ones. And so, she showcases right there why there could have been a motive for the real extremists who were really upset and angry with Charlie Kirk, the people that he said he felt afraid of. He disclosed that to a couple of sources, allegedly. There's also that he had definitely come out and said on Megyn Kelly's show, like, I'm being called the enemy. We're being called the enemy. It's not just that we're disagreeing, it's we're the enemy. Now, what do you do to your enemy? If you're already violent, you're already willing to kill, you've showcased this, you don't mind even sniping children in the head. If you're at that point, why wouldn't, again, you'd be a really bad detective if you didn't actually go and investigate this. If Charlie Kirk is being called an enemy by a group of people, I'm not saying the state of Israel, but I'm saying ultra-Zionist, pro-Israel groups, calling him the enemy, and this group is violent, why would we just suddenly say, no, they didn't kill him? Because what, they don't kill their enemies? Pretty sure they're doing it by the hundreds every day. That would be the motive, because they wanted to silence him. They couldn't handle the conversation. They couldn't handle him questioning. They couldn't handle this basic style of conversation. And Jillian Michaels showcased this, like the emotion, right? I'm not saying that by no means am I saying that Jillian Michaels is, actually Jillian Michaels, I like Jillian because she's been one that's actually been willing to go on shows like Piers Morgan and battle it out with people. She's actually willing to have those conversations. But right now she's not, right? She reached a point of emotion where she's like, I've had it with you and enough, and we just silence this, I'm out of here. And that's the attitude that people are pointing at of what the motive would be for particular Israeli groups to want to silence Charlie Kirk. They've just had it enough. They're just had it with you. You're going to lead people the wrong direction. You're going to, for all of these pro-Israel, young Generation Z guys, suddenly they're going to be questioning Israel. We can't have that. We're done with you. You're the enemy. Boom, you're dead. That is the motive right there. And she showcased it.
Okay.
You wanted to do it anyway.
But let's keep going because I want to show you something else.
All right. Wow. Okay, guys. So, again, to clarify, I don't think Israel did it. And want to know what's crazy is the person who is labeled the #1 anti-Semite out there, who has been anti-Semitic for the last 10 years, Nicholas Fuentes, has come out and said there is no evidence that suggests that Israel did it. And that's what I was literally just about to show.
No one on the show is saying that.
We can play that, please, really quick. Guys, thank you.
They say that
Jesus Christ. Right, okay, so nobody is saying that Israel did it, right? So that's again just pointing that out. I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I'm not against science, and again, there's no evidence that Jeffrey Epstein's linked to Mossad. We just have a lot of circumstantial evidence that really greatly points to it. There's no evidence that Israel did 9/11. But we do have a lot of evidence that makes us suspicious of Israel being somehow involved in 9/11. And I'm going to play a Tucker Carlson clip. He was just on Glenn Greenwald's show, and I'll show you that. There's also no evidence that Israel committed, that they assassinated JFK. but there's also a lot of circumstantial evidence that leads us to suspect them. So there's no evidence that Jeffrey Epstein is Mossad. There's no evidence that Israel did 9/11. There's no evidence that Israel did JFK. And there's no evidence that Israel killed Charlie Kirk. But there's enough circumstantial evidence that starts to make us suspicious. And potentially those suspicions should lead to investigations. And I think that's what people are asking for. Now, let me play for you this clip. This is Andrew Colvett. He is the one that is the spokesperson for TPUSA, the organization, Charlie Kirk's organization. And he clarifies Charlie Kirk's position on Israel. And this sort of, I mean, this actually, if anything, is a little bit more verifying than it is debunking. Here it is.
You asked me this earlier, so let me make sure I'd say it. Charlie's position on Israel was very clear. I like them more than I like Hamas. I just wish I was.
I like them more than I like Hamas. That's not saying much.
Free to criticize Israel and not.
So hold on, let me back
I just wish I was free to criticize Israel and not be labeled an anti-Semite, because I can criticize my own government and not be called anti-American.
Right.
But why do I have more freedom to do, that and not criticize, a foreign government? And he was really upset that there was this sort of clampdown on the freedom of expression, the freedom of ideas, free speech when it came to a foreign government. And
Okay. So he's already saying right there that Charlie did not feel free to speak out, but Charlie kept doing it anyway. So why did he not feel free to speak out? What was the pressure on him that made him feel like he couldn't speak out? So why are people so quick to say, well, no, then Israel would not have silenced him? I mean, clearly they were trying to silence him in a lot of other ways. That's what he's explaining right there. He didn't feel free to speak out. Why not? He had a mouth. Nobody was duct taping it shut. They certainly shut it another way, right? Depending on who did it or why they did it, they certainly did that because they didn't like what he was saying. He was killed because of what he was saying by whoever you think did it. But here you've got Charlie Kirk saying, I don't feel free to speak out. And yet he did it anyway. And now he's dead. So why wouldn't we then, again, go down this path of suspecting everybody? This is like, again, this is also like the lab leak theory. It came from a bat in Wuhan wet market. I don't believe in that. It's like people having to put the disclaimer. The lab leak theory is a conspiracy. But, okay.
I'll say this. He felt like he had earned the right as a friend of the Jewish people over the years and all of the things that he had done. He felt like his bona fides in that respect were unassailable and that he should have the freedom to say, hey, it's time to end the war.
Well, who said he didn't have the freedom? What's the problem? What's the issue? Why couldn't he speak out? That's my point. That's the question we should be asking. What was he afraid of? Why did he think he could not speak out? What did he think the consequence of that would be? What was the consequence? If he says, I don't have the freedom to do that, what consequence was he afraid of? And did that consequence happen to him?
Hey, it's time to stop the killing. But, when with Tucker, for example, we took some pushback. We lost some donors. And what's interesting is it wasn't necessarily Jewish donors, although there was, because that's a misconception about Turning Point's funding base, by the way, is, it's not a whole lot of Jewish donors. It's just not. There was always, I saw the comments online like, oh, the Jewish shekels or something like, it's all this gross stuff. It just wasn't true. And it isn't true. But we did lose, one in particular towards the end that was frustrating.
So they did lose a big donor. You don't actually have to have Jewish donors in order to get Jewish money. The way that what we do know about a lot of the churches that are really evangelical now, the Christian Zionists, which wasn't really a thing prior to the rise of Zionism and this kind of this nationalist movement to create the state of Israel. Zionism wasn't really anything in any religion, any Christian religion. It's just sort of something that happened later. And one of the impetuses of that, one of the reasons why so many churches preach Zionism is because churches run on donations. Guess who donated to those churches? The Zionists. The Israeli Zionists first figured out we can infiltrate the churches and we can actually indoctrinate American Christians into believing that the Jews must return to the homeland in order for Jesus Christ to come again. In order to trigger the second coming, all the Jews must gather in the land of Israel. That was something that many of the churches now we've been able to trace back, not me in particular, but plenty of other people that have done the research on this have been able to trace back that many of these churches accepted large donations from from very, very wealthy Jewish Zionists. So it started with the Jewish Zionists that then infiltrated these churches, gave them large donations, and encouraged them to teach Christian Zionism. So you can receive, so now the Christian Zionists, I do believe, were funding a lot of TPUSA, but a lot of those Christian Zionist churches were still running on donations. So it's a way to funnel, and they don't have to disclose where their donations come from. So you've got these churches that are receiving money, and then those churches go and they donate to TPUSA. So Netanyahu giving $150 million to TPUSA, for example, very well could have broken that up and funneled it through Christian churches. And it would have looked like it came from Christian Americans. I mean, again, just be a basic detective. And I certainly hope that if I were to be killed, that the detectives wouldn't just, shove off any sort of, if my family comes to them and says, well, she was receiving threats, or she felt not even receiving threat, well, sort of, people calling her an enemy. There's a whole group of people that were emailing Kim every day, calling her the enemy. There was a whole group of people that were telling her how much they hated her now because she said XYZ thing. I hope that the cops wouldn't just say, oh, sounds like a conspiracy theory. They clearly weren't the ones who killed her. I mean, they were sending her basically death threats every day, but they didn't do it. Obviously, they didn't do it. They were calling her the enemy, but no, it wasn't them. I mean, come on, use your marbles for just a minute. I do want to play this for you. Again, going down the road of there is no evidence. Oh, there's no evidence. 9/11, we don't have any evidence that Israel did this, but we have some circumstantial evidence, and we do have some evidence of certain things that make us highly suspicious. And that's sort of my point when it comes to Charlie Kirk. So let me play this for you. This is Tucker Carlson on Glenn Greenwald's show talking about 9/11. He just recently, I believe he released a series on 9/11. I think it was supposed to come out a different day, but now it's out. I actually don't even know. But he's talking about this, and I'm going to play this for you.
Can't. I mean, Bibi's running around. This is a fact. I'm not guessing about this because I talked to people he said it to.
Sorry, this is not the one. Let me play this. Here's the one.
Within hours, the buildings were still burning. There were people in Washington discussing and pushing a war against Iraq, which I don't think any smart person ever believed had any connection to 9/11. There was a lot of reason to believe that having Saddam in power was probably good for the United States as a counterbalance against Iran, as the protector of millions of Christians. There are a lot of reasons that Saddam wasn't the worst, and certainly much better than what we got after. But nevertheless, at the behest of a foreign government, Israel, the United States began preparing for war against Iraq immediately after the attacks on 9/11. Now, I'm not saying I don't know more than that. So you can draw your own conclusions, and I'm not suggesting that they staged 9/11 for that purpose, but I am saying unequivocally they used 9/11 for that purpose. We know that. That's not a conspiracy theory, and it's appalling. It's disgusting.
And of course, as well as anybody that well before 9/11, there were all sorts of growing calls on the usual suspects within Washington to try and demand that we engage in regime change in Iraq and remove Saddam Hussein. That was, the sort of great aspiration of neocons, not just in Washington, but also in Israel. That's and then 9/11 immediately got seized on for that. All right, let me move to all of the issues surrounding Charlie Kirk. And before I get to
may I just say one last thing?
Sure.
May I say one last thing that I think is important? So the question about 9/11, the reason people have debated it for 25 years is the question of foreknowledge. Do people know this was coming? And then it's a question of did they know it and allow it unintentionally or intentionally, or did they stage it? I can't answer those questions. But we conclusively answered the larger question, which is, there was foreknowledge of it. There's no question about it. CIA knew the hijackers were here. They knew they were terrorists, and they were here to commit acts of terror against the United States. And critically, and this is the fact that somehow blew my mind the most, people bet in the public financial markets, the equity markets, against the airlines involved in 9/11 and the banks in the buildings that were taken down on 9/11. And they bet big, they shorted them, and they made a lot of money. This has been sort of known. What I didn't know is that the U.S. government found the identities of the people who did that, and they withheld them. And to this day, they've never been revealed. So this is a publicly traded series of trades, and in public markets, and we can't know who made those trades. Whoever made those trades clearly knew 9/11 was coming, and the government has protected the identity of those people for 24 years.
So what Tucker is saying is we cannot answer for sure whether or not Israel staged 9/11, if they were involved in 9/11. What we do know for sure is that they knew about it. Now, whether they knew about it and they didn't warn us and they just kind of sat back and let it happen, or they knew about it because they were the ones doing it. We don't actually have the answer to that question. But the fact they even had foreknowledge of it, the fact people were putting trades down, that clearly they knew about 9/11. Clearly, there's a lot of evidence of this foreknowledge. Clearly, and then we've got the dancing Israelis. There's all this stuff. The fact that they knew about it should lead us to an investigation of, well, then did they actually do it? But of course, if you even think that or say that out loud, you're suddenly a conspiracy theorist. You're not allowed to go down that road. You're supposed to say, no, I don't think Israel did 9/11, but, and then you layer on all of the circumstantial evidence as to why you think, how they are connected to it. So there's enough question on 9/11, knowing now that they had foreknowledge of 9/11, knowing now that trades were made against these airlines and whatnot. Knowing absolutely without a doubt that they had foreknowledge of it, why wouldn't you then go down the path of, well, did they do it then? Were they involved? Did they conspire against the United States? Especially since they certainly, another circumstantial evidence we have is they absolutely, after 9/11, used it for their benefit. 1,000%. They used it to march us into war with Iraq of all places, even though the hijackers on the plane came from Saudi Arabia, but somehow it was Iraq's fault. So they absolutely used it for their benefit. They absolutely knew about it. So the question is, and it's a fair question, are they involved in the implementation of 9/11? Same thing for JFK assassination, same thing for Epstein being a Mossad agent, and same thing for Charlie Kirk's death, is that if there's enough circumstantial evidence that points towards a group or in a direction, then it is your obligation, if you're a good journalist or if you're a good detective, to go down that path and investigate it. But instead, what I'm hearing and what I saw from this episode of Her Take with Jillian Michaels, what I'm hearing over and over and all over the internet is Israel didn't do it. It's crazy to think Israel did it. It's insane to think Israel did it. Well, you sound like a lot of people out there who say now the Trump administration saying you're an insane conspiracy theorist if you think Jeffrey Epstein is Mossad. It's an insane conspiracy theorist. People say if you think that Israel was involved in 9/11, you're an insane conspiracy theorist. If you think anybody other than Oswald killed JFK, you're just an insane conspiracy theorist. Well, usually, what's been happening over the years is that if whatever's being labeled as a conspiracy theorist tends to be true, ends up not being a theory at all, but an actual conspiracy. So if that's the case, then even more reason, I think, to investigate Israel when it comes to the death of Charlie Kirk. Thank you for watching this clip from the full Kim Iversen Show, which you can catch Monday through Friday, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern at KimIversonShow.com. It is free for you to watch. Again, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern, KimIversonShow.com. See you there.